Opera in the Making. I wanted to talk about it and also talk about the idea of captured improvisations and share with you some thoughts on sound. And then I wanted to zoom in on some specific sounds, like really specific. And I also have organized this in 5 parts, which I'll just show you quickly, which is just an introduction to the opera, then thoughts about sound, zooming in on specifics, and then of course plenty of time for comments, questions, or discussion. So also if you have a question at any point, just feel free to ask it. I should say that writing for voice has been a huge passion for me. I sang in a choir as a child, and I used to make up songs on the guitar and sing along. So a large part of the catalog that I've written includes the human voice. And the 3 works I played, as some of you were coming in, were a sampling of some of the vocal work that I've done. I really feel that the human voice is a great carrier, of musical meaning and possibility and sensuality, and it's very, very powerful, and I've loved setting so many different texts. So a consortium of opera houses led by Santa Fe and San Francisco, and also including Kansas City, St. Louis, Sarasota, and Seattle, decided that they would co-commission a piece. And they invited me to throw my hat in the ring, and I wrote back and said I'd be delighted to, that would be lovely. And I never expected to receive this commission. And it went on, and then of course with all these houses they had lists of composers, and apparently they had 50 composers, and then they got it down to 40 and so on, and then they got it down to 3. And at that stage they told me I was one of the 3, and I still didn't think I would get this. But in any case, it's a wonderful, wonderful project to have all of them working together on a new project. And it's made possible by the Melville Hanks Family Foundation and by the Mellon Foundation. So when they called me to say that I received this commission, there was this press conference. This was a picture from the press conference with 3 of the opera folks. And it will be premiered in Santa Fe in 1 year from now, October 25th. So in thinking about it, what goes into composing an opera? Now, we could spend like 4 years just on that subject, but I thought for today it might be interesting to talk about material, like what is the music, what is the text, what's the story, and what story are we telling? And then from the initial concept to the opening night, what goes into it? In a way, I don't know, because I haven't finished writing it yet and it hasn't been premiered, but I think it would be interesting to talk about the sense of creative team and doing workshops and rehearsals leading toward that. And then how can the librettist and the composer and the artist make something fresh and new in an ancient genre? What imbues something with a certain kind of freshness? So I have always been interested in scat and jazz. I've been, of course, listening to classical music my whole life, but a lot also to jazz. And I became enamored of this beatboxer. And brace yourselves, because you might think I'm completely crazy based on the musical excerpts of mine that you just heard when you were coming in. But she's absolutely amazing, and if you'll allow me, I'm going to try to get the technology to work so I can play you maybe 30 seconds of this young beatboxer. Okay, yes, here we go.
My turn. Smash it.
I'm going to stop there. But she's amazing. And it's very difficult to do that. I just thought she's so gifted. And it's very difficult to do that. I mean, she's been practicing that for years. And so I decided, well, with all these opera houses, what if I proposed that she was the lead? And I'm sure that they were pretty freaked out, as you can probably imagine. But I thought it would be really, really interesting if we could cross the tradition of opera with beatboxing and make a crisscross throughout the course of the piece. Anyway, she's this remarkable young woman, and she is going to be the lead in this opera. So I was thinking, well, what was the initial idea? It was a concept for sound and the sonic image. Like, how could I take that sound world and cross it with opera? And as if Nicole was one of these gears, and this is an opera gear, and what other gears would you need in the sound field to be able to make this work? And what kind of vocal kaleidoscope would be built? So I reached out to her through my assistant and her agent, and I asked if I could meet her. So I went down to St. Louis, where she lives, and we met at the airport hotel. And I basically told her that I wanted her to be in my opera. And we sat in the lobby of the hotel. We were beatboxing back and forth to each other and like practicing, because I wanted to see how she sang. And anyway, then when I asked her to be in the opera, she burst into tears. She said she always wanted to be in an opera, and she's the most beautifully radiant, wonderful, amazing person. So the idea here is to be storytelling with emotions and action, and in a kaleidoscope of sound. I don't know if you can see those words, but then around it to do it with beatboxing and singing and speaking and Sprechstimme. So beatboxing is what she was doing. So it's beat, like beat boxing, all this kind of thing. So it's sort of coming out of scat and a little bit out of rap and a little bit out of beats. But it's quite hard when you get when she was getting all the different layers going. It's tricky. So anyway, laughter, and then I thought if I had animal sounds and nature sounds, you can start to crisscross these traditions. And then thinking of other sounds that might go with it, and then ways to thread through this, and then to kind of build a huge sonic palette. So that, in a way, when you leave the opera house, if you've been to this opera, you've experienced some kind of incredible transformation of the voices of all kinds. So in order to do this, I decided I should put together workshops. So I basically spent the entire commission fee doing workshops, just to see if I could make the thing work. So I got my good friends, they're my collaborators of basically 10 years, Third Coast Percussion, and Nicole, and Connie Volk, and Ben Melsky, who's in the Grossman Ensemble, by the way. And we got together and did a full day where I made an activity book, and we went through all these activities. I then needed a libretto. And so I called my friend Leslie, and I said to her, well, I'm having a beatboxer, and I need animal sounds, and I have to crisscross these traditions, and I want it to be funny, and this whole laundry list. And she's listening on the phone like, And so, how are you going to write a libretto for this? So she wrote an original libretto, and the idea for this opera, Nicole, I don't know if this thing works, but Nicole is this pink line. She's the beatboxer up top, and down below here is the opera. So what happens in this opera is the beatboxer comes out and starts beatboxing thinking it's her show, and then all of a sudden she's told she's arrived on the wrong day, and there's an opera taking place. And so while she's in the middle of her beatbox show, the opera just starts. And she's startled, but she says, well, I'll watch a little bit of it. I'm probably going to leave, because I don't like opera, but I'll stay for a little while. And she does stay for a little while, and little by little up here, she starts dipping into the opera. That's what these little drips are. But as the opera goes on, all of a sudden, she just joins the opera. The whole thing completely crisscrosses, and she's just in the opera. So there's this illusion line of she's outside the opera and then inside the opera. So it's really playful and quite funny, because Nicole is just funny also. She's so charming and witty. So, with that kind of a plan, and then this kind of a sonic plan, I did another workshop with a larger group. And then we went down to Santa Fe and did we saw the costume shop and the set design shop and all of that. And we did some podcasts together. And then I put together another workshop, and this is the one I'm going to show you a few videos from. So after all of these workshops, Nicole got some feel for it, and she made this little clip, and she wanted, she likes to, I want to play it for you.
Augusta Read Thomas and Nicole Paris. What boundaries? What boundaries? Boundaries. Boundaries. Get ready.
She's so funny. So I thought I would talk about how I hear sound. That's the premise of what I'm making. How am I going to do that, and how do I hear sound? I think about sound as existing in a kind of organic gestalt. I like to think of transformations and connections so that every single sound is coming from a kind of web of sound. And this is something I just drew as a caprice, but you can't separate spontaneity from instrumentation or from character or from empathy with the musicians or flux or pitch or rhythm. You can't separate these objects out. You could pull one forward in this labyrinth. You could pull one forward like that. But all the others stay with it. So for instance, if I were I'm going to just make something up. If I were to do something rhythmic, let's say I'm going to pull forward rhythm. So I do something like, let's say it's for orchestra and it's big chords. So it's something like, something like that. You can hear that the rhythm has come forward. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2. That's been pulled forward, but you can also hear what the outer, like there must be some chords there, and there were certain articulations that were very different with each chord, and so on and so forth. Or you could pull two things forward. You could pull texture and color forward. So if you imagine this as a 3D object, and we take any sound at all, just there's a little note, and we just put it there, I like to think of the fact that that note could go anywhere. One could take it in any direction, and that made me think of Paul Klee and the Pedagogical Sketchbook, where he talks about taking a line for a walk. And he also draws these things where you can feel like which direction is something going, or how is it picking up density or mass. So this idea of being able to move in many directions and yet at the same time retaining this gestalt. So to a certain extent, I like to think about captured improvisations. For instance, if I were to just make something up like improvisatory, like it's a little, let's say I decided that was going to be in the flute part. How do I capture that? It's an improvisation. I want it to have that spirit and that inner life, and to try to capture it in the notation, and then to get a player to play it like that. So it's not like academic and sort of like, letter B and letter A, but it has like more inner life. And so this comes from thinking about things being embodied and singing it and dancing it, or being able to play it on the piano or scat it, and really think about what is this piece doing? What am I capturing, that little thing I just sang, and how do I specify it, and how do I particularize it? And the reason I wanted to talk about this is because Nicole Paris doesn't read music, and nor does someone else in the opera. So all of this work that I do with all of my pieces has to be rethought with this particular opera. So there's this balance between capturing something, like I just sang, and keeping it nuanced, but on the other hand, having it sound spontaneous. So then one has to think about, like, what are the materials? So for instance, if I were to have material that's just like ba da 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 da, that's material. I don't think it's very good. It doesn't interest me. It's not my material for my work, but it's material. So what is the material that is for my work? And why is it that way? And why does the music sound the way it does? So, you really have to think about what are the materials that the composer's using. And I like my materials to grow up out of these organic networks, and to think of the specificity of a particular piece. For instance, if you're writing for string quartet, you have one kind of material. But if you're writing for the Berlin Philharmonic, you have another kind of material. If you're writing for girls' chorus, it's another kind of material. And the good composers can really capture the essence of what you've been commissioned to write. So again, thinking of the musical idea and the material. So here's some material. These are some chords from a particular piece. This is working out some lines, some counterpoints, more chords. This is chords, actually, that I was writing on an airplane. They go this way. Then they started leaning like that. But working out a chord progression and how one might set a text, pulling out certain words and having ideas about that. Images, sonic images of what a sound might be. And then maps of the form. I really like to think a lot about the form of my pieces. So this is a form. I cut out this little piece of paper here and taped it on there, just to get a sense of the timing of the piece. I like it that if somebody comes to hear a piece of mine, you feel that I took care of the time, like every 15 seconds, every 10 seconds. So it doesn't just wander. There's actual content, there's material in the piece, and there's a reason for that material. So I've spent a lot of time working out, down to the minute or down to the 15 seconds as to what is happening in a given piece. And of course, this becomes very difficult when you're dealing with an artist who's improvising. Because sometimes with improvisers, you tell them, okay, you have 1 minute, and then they go on for 4 minutes. And that's not a bad thing, but it's hard to keep track when you're on a roll. But it's also hard for me because I care about like every 5 seconds, that I don't want to waste anybody's time in the audience. So that's another challenge with this particular opera. So I thought I would just zoom in on a couple of really specific details, as if we could look under the hood of a piece. And I promise this won't be too academic or boring. But there's about 8 slides I wanted to go through and then open for your questions. So this is, an interest of mine is thinking of like, how would a poet be revising something? Or a quick sketch of an architect, different ways of looking at something. Or working on a math problem. So, how do we do this with music? So this is a piece I wrote for the Spectral Quartet. It's dedicated to Elizabeth Davenport at the Rockefeller Chapel and the Spectral. And it's a good performance. So that's all I want to focus on, 4 bars. And so let's just hear the 4 bars one more time. You're going to hear a violin line that's ascending, and the other 3 people are in a different color, which is pizzicato. And I would just ask you, like, what is this violin actually doing? Like, what's happening in the material of this object? So for now, what I want to do is just subtract the pizzicatos. We're just going to suck them out of the piece. So that layer is gone. Now we're going to go back to the violin line and focus on that. So one of the things you notice right away is you have an ascending line and another one and another one. And then in the 4th phrase, it gets very tight, right? All the notes get very close together. And then the 5th phrase, it leaps up further. So I'm going to play it one more time. One of the things that interests me is that it's leaping over, it's not close. It's like doing these leaps up. And then it starts again, and it tries to leap up, and then it keeps trying to leap up. And it keeps hitting that same high note. As hard as it tries to go higher, it can't at this point. So one thing you might think of, if you could imagine in your mind's eye 6 birds on a branch, if you can place that in your mind, so this bird is going yaw ba dee doo bop, and the other one's going yaw ta ta, and then the other one's going da ba doo bop, and the other one's going da da go 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 go. It's like they're each doing a slightly different phrase, and yet it's all one line, except inside of it there are these sub-phrases. Whoops, backwards. As if each one had a slightly different color, and yet at the same time, it's one line. So the next, there's just a few more of these, but in this case, I wanted to just focus on the high note, and the duration is always changing. Short, longer, and then it goes down. And we finally get to something longer. So what happens if we take the entire thing with all the leaps and we just put it all in 1 octave? We just squish it down as if it was all very close together. So it could work, but it's completely different, right? Because when you have this sense of leaping up, you feel like you need the pizzicato, like bo, ba-dee go, ga, do, ga, gi, da. It's sort of got that energy, but if you put it all in 1 octave, it's more chill. It's not a bad thing, but it's just completely different. So what we're really talking about is energy flows and lift and lilt and impulse. Is it on your heels or is it on the tiptoes? Like, what's actually happening in the sound at that moment? and what are the velocities. So one of the things you'll notice is that there's an enormous amount of rests. Like everywhere you look at this, it's full of rests. What happens if we just take them all out? So it becomes very, very lyrical, and that can work too, but it's different. I would be saying something different. And I don't feel the need for the pizzicato hockets, because the violin is just being lyric. You don't need to be interrupted by a pizzicato. So, and then the question is, do I do all this analysis like before the fact or after the fact? I basically just improvise, and then I try to capture my improvisations, and I have this balance between intellect and intuition. But always thinking of like, what are the elements of the ideas? What is the material? Where am I taking it? And am I keeping it in a gestalt? So for instance, here, tempo is very important. Because if this piece goes like, ya, ta, 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 plunk, da, ta, ta, plink. It just doesn't really, that's not what I wrote. But also if it goes that isn't either. So what is the tempo? And I get very precise about tempi. Like if people play my wrong tempos, I get nervous. Because I really conceive of something at a particular tempo. The next thing I wanted to say is all the articulations. We've only got 4 bars, but there's a lot of articulations. And I'll just point one out. It starts with an accent and a down bow. So it's like, ja. Like an accent. And then the next note has a dot and an up bow. So it's like, ja, ba. It's just a tiny little thing, like the accent down bow, dot up bow, double forte, and then dramatic. So these are just really specific details that are all over everything that I write, because I wouldn't want it to go like cha, 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 cha. I want it to go pa, ti, ta. I want it to have that kind of energy, which is part of like the leaping up and then the pizzicato and the whole thing. So basically, I drive my engraver crazy, because if they put like a wrong dot somewhere, I can't handle it. I just want everything to be exactly where it should be. So here are all these dynamics, very, very sculpted. And just to point maybe one dynamic out is this one here. After this high note, you have this big crescendo here. So it goes ja ba di ba ba cha 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 cha. Now that crescendo to me is very important. So it goes. What I wrote is da 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 da. Wait, sorry. Da 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 da. So the crescendo like pushes us into the small notes. But if I didn't have that crescendo there, if it was like ba, ya, da di da da, da 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 da, it doesn't have that same kind of. So it just looks like this little tiny thing right there. But to me, that's a lot about the energy of a piece, is that level of detail. And then, of course, a lot of adjectives. It's saying it's about life force and playful, dramatic, pitter-patter, expressive, stately, a lot of different characters. And so far, we're 4 bars into the piece. Yeah, I'm definitely I'm a perfectionist. And that's also why I wanted to tell you all this, because I'm now making an opera where I cannot be a perfectionist. And this is exactly what I do most of my life. So I thought I would just play you one where I just built the bad flow. I took something similar to what I wrote, but the flow is all wrong. So, it's sort of similar material, but it just totally doesn't work to my ears. I don't know how it strikes your ears. And then this is what I wrote. So, one tells, what makes something incongruous and what makes something integral. A moment ago, I was talking about captured improvisations, but I think probably a better way to describe what I do is that they're polished and nuanced, and they're notated, and they're captured sound sculptures. Like, I don't know the word sculpture is perfect, but they're these sound objects that I'm capturing. And they always catch life as a spontaneous, capricious, playful improvisation. If I had to write a program note that would capture probably everything I've written in a nutshell, I would say that it has a natural impulse, and it's mobile and flexible, and sonorous, resonant, intentional, interlaced, and and braided, contrapuntal basically, woven circuit networks. It seems like all of those words just make sense in my brain. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Yeah?
So how did beatbox get on your radar screen in the first place?
Well, I've always been, Louis Armstrong was my idol when I was a child, and I always loved his scat and Ella Fitzgerald's scat and jazz, and I also sing all my own music. Like, I'm constantly kind of beatboxing myself in a certain way, and I just love the energy of it. And I was thinking, in opera, it would be so interesting to bring different people into the opera house, people who don't think that that's where they would normally find certain kind of artists, and to find a way to crisscross those traditions. It seems really like normal to me. And in terms of, a lot of my music is very rhythmic, it's very colorful, and a lot of my music has this inner life and propelling that's not far from beatboxing, although it sounds like classical music or something, but it's still got that same spirit. So to me it seems normal, but I realize probably from your perspective you're thinking that I must be nuts. Because I could have just gotten 2 opera singers and a nice story and I'd be done already. But I decided to go for this. It's quite an ambitious thing to try to do. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do it because it depends on who the artists are. But I think it could really work if we can really do this crisscross. We start with her outside in the opera, and then little by little we go through the animal sounds, and then they all end up in the same plethora of vocal sounds. So it's going to take a lot of coaching. Yeah, thank you.
Who wrote the words and beats and so forth for Nicole? Was it you and librettist, or Nicole was collaborative, or how did that?
So Leslie wrote all the words, and they're all there for Nicole, but she doesn't have to do them exactly. So Leslie wrote this amazing candy thing, but Leslie wrote it out. She's very, very, very good with words. So her thing is like a rhythmic poem. And then one of the challenges for this workshop was for all of us, not just Nicole, but for all of us, just to get people comfortable. Nicole was having to do 78 cues and follow along with a cue book and figure out where everyone else was. So right now, I think she can do, she's so grift, she can do better, but she might also follow Leslie's text a little more. But basically the spirit of the text was all written by Leslie. And Nicole is following them pretty closly. Although she did some interjections just on her own at the moment, because she's just witty. Yeah, you had a question?
Yeah, you have a very visual approach to music, where you color diagrams, sound sculptures. How much do you intend to get involved with set design?
That's a really interesting question. So right now they're at the stage where they're trying to decide on a director. And when you have a lot of different people involved in a lot of different houses, there's differing opinions. So once the director is settled, hopefully in the next 3 weeks, then there'll be a lighting person and a costume person. And so I would like to, I have a sense of things, but these people are so gifted, these designers. I kind of don't want to limit them with my perspective. But it should be fun because there's lots of different scenes in this opera and they move quickly. The whole thing is 70 minutes at the most. And a lot of different situations get set up. And I think it could be really fun with the outside the opera, the inside the opera, and how Nicole comes in and out. So the designers should have fun with that, plus all the animals. And the whole thing takes place on a rooftop garden. And you could just imagine what a designer could do with that. And then they go down into the city and have adventures. And then they find grandmother down in a cellar where she's with her ocarina, like almost praying to her seeds. It's a beautiful scene where she's just like with the earth and with her seeds and her roots. And then they bring her out. And so there's lots of little scenes throughout. Boy, thank you for your questions. Why don't we do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? So right here.
When they solicited applications for this commission, did you have the kernel of this idea, or they just said, well, we know you, we know your portfolio, and we decided we want you to write it now?
Yeah, well, they reviewed all my vocal works, of which, as I mentioned, there are quite a lot. And I had applied with a different libretto and a different librettist and a different piece. And that's the one they picked. And then unfortunately the librettist got very ill. And then they decided they didn't want to work with a librettist who was not well. So then I dropped the project because I said, I don't have, he's sick, I don't have another libretto. So I kind of stuck with him, which he appreciated. So I turned down the commission. And then 3 weeks later, they came back and they said, but we all really wanted you. Could you propose something else? And so I said, well, I've always been in love with Nicole Paris, And they were like, oh. I just, I actually, if we can do it right, if we get the right creative team, it could be really magical 70 minutes. So anyway, there was a bit of back and forth because I think some of the companies were extremely nervous about this, to be frank. And I don't blame them. I suppose if I were on their side, I'd be nervous too. But on the other hand, I think if I were to go to an opera and it's like, okay, 70 minutes, beatboxing, crossing with opera, I'd be like, I'm there. I just want to see what's happening. Rather than another opera that's kind of, I don't know, sometimes opera can be so conservative and like so self-similar that it's sort of like, well, now this happens and that happens, but it never feels fresh. Like people might hate this opera, but at least it's fresh, You know what I mean? It's got that kind of thing going. Yeah.
When you described the premise, she shows up on the wrong day, and it's an opera and a beatbox, it just brought to mind Ariadne Afnama.
Yes, exactly.
Did that enter your thoughts at all? That,
it's
those who don't know, it's the comedy and the tragedy. He says, well, we don't have time to do them both, so you just do them simultaneously.
Exactly. Ariadne, definitely the cunning little vixen, magic flute. There's lots of kind of perfumes in this opera. So the librettist, Leslie Dutton Downer, aside from speaking 6 languages and summa cum laude from Harvard, and she's done tons of theater pieces all over the world, and she's got 6 things going at once, like in Berlin right now and in somewhere else and somewhere else. Anyway, she's like sort of a genius. She wrote the cocktail table book on the history of opera. So she knows like opera backwards and forwards. And she also wrote the history of Shakespeare. And she wrote like 5 other books. But she really is a theater person and she really knows theater. And that's why I called her, because I figured like who on earth, which librettist when you call up and tell what I wanted, and and I also wanted it to be funny. And comedy is so much harder than tragedy. So much harder. So then she's like, are you sure this is really hard to do? And I'm like, let's make it funny, Because I figure like 70 minutes, just you go and you laugh. Like when we did this workshop, so many people were laughing so hard. Some of you may have been there, I'm not sure, but it was like a lot of laughter happened, and that was good. Yeah.
When I make music like that, my wife says I have Asperger's. How do I explain to her?
No, it's a good point. I mean, it's an acquired taste, but beatboxing isn't for everybody. But on the other hand, what I'm trying, we didn't see it in these excerpts, what I'm trying to get Nicole to do is to sing and to mix in, sprinkle in operatic singing and sprinkle in other kinds of sounds. So in a way it's broadening her practice. But yeah, there's still beatboxing in it, and that's just, it's just part of the sound envelope, as I said, a sonic image for this piece. Well, there was one here, and then we'll go here.
Yeah, thanks. I'm really struck by all of your diagrams. I think it's really generous of you to be so open and sharing all of them. When I think about sketches in music by Beethoven, they're gray, they're usually on stock paper, they're messy, but they're not at all colorful like this. But it really makes me wonder is how, with so much going on in your life, you organize time and projects. Get creativity to happen to this extent when in limited time.
Yeah, it's really busy because I run the center here, as I referred to, and that's a huge full-time job. And then I also teach, a whole bunch of students. And then I travel a lot. Yesterday I was in Philly, and right after this I'm flying back to New York for another thing. So I travel, all the time. But, I just love writing music. And this is like probably too personal, but I've had insomnia for like 30 years. So I don't sleep that much. And then I've also sort of organized my life. So I have a full-time personal assistant, and I have a full-time copyist, and I have other people that help me with things. Because otherwise, like, I don't want to do anything. Like, I don't want to cook. I don't want to go to the grocery store. I don't want to pick up my dry cleaning. I don't want to do anything. I just want to write music and help other people, like, build the center and teach well. So it's sort of crazy because you like earn a salary and then you pay it all to everybody else so that you can earn the salary that you're paying them. It's like sort of a little bit nuts, but It is busy, but I try to get as much help as I can. So I basically write music, try to be a good teacher, and try to be a citizen. And yeah, it's fun. I mean, it's invigorating. But these pieces take a lot. And looking back at it, I'm a little crazy because this project has taken so much out of me. You know, I could have just done a nice little thing. So I think, but on the other hand, it's been fun. But it hasn't been really time effective. It's been pretty intense. Yeah, we'll go here first and then here.
Where are you in this? Is it done? Are you almost done? What's is a year from now that this is going to be performed?
Exactly. Thank you for asking. And by the way, let me just say thank you all for I'm a little shy about showing these videos because you're going to be like, what is she doing? But it's going to be premiered in a year. So when we did this workshop a month ago, we went from beginning to end. It's all written out. The score is 380 pages of detailed notation. You know, it's an intense, huge, big book like this. But now we're in the process of revising it because we want to make Nicole's role more integral and have her have more agency in the piece and have it in a way that she can be more comfortable. And I also want to shorten the duration a little bit. So we're basically doing dramaturgical screw tightening, if you know what I mean. It's mostly between the dramaturg and the librettist because I can't really do my tweaks until they've tightened up their things. I have Nicole coming up to my house on November 4th. We're going to spend the whole day because I want to expand her practice more now that it was so helpful for her really to just do it once and also to see how the audience reacted to her. But now we have to get her, you know, moving in a different direction sort of, and so that'll be super fun. She's really nice. And then they're hiring the director now and then the set. So basically I have to turn the entire thing in December 31st, which is like tomorrow. So I'm waiting for the revisions from the dramaturg and then I'm going to dive right in and then hand it in. And then I can't really change because they hire the singers at that point and a piano reduction is made and I kind of have to let it go. And then I will go out for 3 weeks in and out around the time of the world premiere. And so, yeah, it's almost, we're getting there. But I feel like once they hire the singers, I have to go meet every single singer and be in a room with them and explain to them the concept, like that map I drew. I have to try to explain that to them because, you know, some opera singers will be like, well, I don't scat, or I don't whisper, or I won't laugh. You know, it'll hurt my voice. So, you know, that's probably not the right singer for this project. But, you know, so to find the right artists and to really try to explain really the reason why I'm doing this. This is very thought out. As capricious and fun and you know, entertaining as it is, it's very polished in a certain way. We probably have time for just one last question.
Understudy for Nicole's years, and also, by the way, it's not an opera, but it invoked Prokofiev's Peter the Wolf.
Yeah, oh, that's interesting.
And this is a young adult.
Yes.
And this is, you know, we're losing audiences to opera, and so I think this is perfect for young adults and preteens.
Exactly, that was their concept, to make a piece that young artists would like, but that also would appeal to adults. You know, that actually has like real music and a real story and some real concepts behind it. Because I know as an adult, I'm interested in this whole vocal kaleidoscope by any composer that would be doing that. But as a child, you know, I can associate with this trickster or with the animals or something. So hopefully if we do it right, it can be for all ages. And though, yeah, there is not Nicole is sort of so good and you're not the first person who asked what happens if, because she's like the show. And in fact, I built the whole show for her. I asked her and then I built the whole thing around her. So it's really crucial. But she's really excited because she's going to get all these opera contracts and she's going to like go on the opera stage and meet all these new people, and then she's around her productions with the opera, she's going to do her beatbox shows. And so it'll be very helpful for her, I hate the word career, but it'll be helpful for her career to meet a whole bunch of new people and you know, get to share her joy and her love and her incredible skill. It's hard to do what she does. So I just hope she doesn't get sick or get upset or anything. But she's super into it. Yeah.
Would you please say if you are going to go to all the operas who co-sponsored this? Is it planned to go out to co-sponsor?
Yes, and I will, I mean, they won't do it all, it'll take about 4 years, you know, to rotate, but it can also be done anywhere. If it's not in one of those 5 cities, or 6 cities, it can be done anywhere by anybody. So another city could say, we want to produce it, and they can just put it on anytime after October 25th. So I'm hoping that some other cities or other people will say, let's put this on. And that's allowed in the contract. So it doesn't just have to be that.
Won't it be tough for other cities to put it on if they don't have Nicole? I mean, and obviously, composers have always been for specific singers and performers, but you're saying you did the whole thing around her. So
Yes.
It makes it tough, I would think, for other.
It is tough, but I do think that that special guest artist role, as is described in the handout, could be played by someone else. It could be played by a beat poet, or it could be played by a jazz singer. Yes, exactly. It could be played by different people. But anyway, I know we have to stop, and I just, again, as I started at the beginning, thank you so much, and I appreciate it. Yeah.